District Board of Education workshop. We want to let the public know that we are videotaping today's workshop. The recording is being live streamed on the district's YouTube channel, and a link to the recording has been posted to the district's website. As a reminder, per Contra Costa Health Services requirements, masks are required indoors for all persons regardless of vaccination status. Okay, I'd like to introduce our board members, Vice President Ken Mintz.
Good afternoon.
Clerk Rachel Hurd. Good afternoon. Board members Laura Brett.
Hello.
And Shelley Clark.
Good afternoon.
Student board member Ronit Batra could not join us today, and I'm your President Anna Ordway. At this point, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. 3.0, acceptance of our workshop agenda. So may I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. The motion was made by Board Member Bratt and seconded by Board Member Clark. Call out vote. Board Member Hurd?
Aye.
Board Member Clark?
Aye.
Board Member Bratt?
Aye.
Board Member Ordway?
Aye.
Board Member Mintz?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Great, thanks. And then, so we're going to start our board governance workshop today. I'm going to introduce Assistant Superintendent Christine Garardo, who will lead the workshop for us.
Sure. Thank you, President Orway. I'm actually going to turn it over to our Superintendent, Dr. Malloy, to get us off with our first topic.
And thank you. And sorry, President Ordway, we made a shift and we needed
That's
to
right.
shift the script. But because we're doing a governance workshop and the majority of our workshop is about the resolutions, under this particular title, we also wanted to bring one other question forward to you, just for your insight in a workshop setting. If you wanted action or were willing to take action on it, it would need to be at a board meeting, but we just thought this was a good public space for us to ask the question. And it involves the notion of, and it's coming to the board this week, the approval for out-of-state trips. And the reason I, as a new-ish superintendent, am asking the question is this has most recently crossed my desk, and it raised a question for me about, well, what are the parameters the board expects us to follow? So John's going to explain very briefly that there are clear parameters that we must follow when approving those trips based upon historical conversation. And then the last part of the admin regulation speaks to your approval of it. I'm certainly fine if you wish to continue that practice, but I'm also naming that that was an unusual piece for me coming from other places. Certainly the parameters aren't unusual. The expectation that we follow those parameters aren't unusual, but the actual getting it to a board meeting, especially when it may or may not fall within the timelines of an actual board schedule, was new to me. So I thought, let's just bring it here under governance because it is about how we oversee our work. John's going to explain very briefly how the admin regulation works, and then frankly, you can tell us if it's something you're willing for me to bring to a board meeting for discussion or not. Now, I know it's an admin regulation, but obviously you give approval to us for those very important pieces. John, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy and trustees. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but there's three categories. Category one of a school trip is a day trip or an athletic event. Category two is when we are going over 200 miles or spending the night somewhere. And both of those are approved by the site principal and then someone from ESC, and it's been me the last 3 years. So I approve those. Then we have category three, which is an out-of-state trip. And we've had a history with some out-of-state trips and different criteria, but I want to start with the provision that is there. Once the principal approves, I bring it to the entire ed service team led by Ms. Huardo. We discuss it. Sometimes we make recommendations to it. Then we approve or deny it. And then it comes to the board 4 months prior to the trip occurring. So that's the part I'd like to speak about. All of the ARs are great in terms of It's anyone is allowed to go. The fundraising must be there. No one is denied access. The supervision, the fingerprinting, we have it all spelled out, and we have a great system through Be a Mentor. So what we started to discuss is, do we want to, and I'm going to read the direct line, preliminary approval. This is in category 3 of AR 6153, step 2. Preliminary approval is the responsibility of the principal. The recommendation for approval is then forwarded to Ed Services, who will review it, and if approved, forward to the Board of Education for final approval. And that's where we started to have the discussion. Approval timeline. After ESC has approved it, approvals may be finalized and submitted to the board no later than 4 months prior to the field trip for out of state and 5 months prior to trips for outside of the U.S. And then it's up to you to discuss, approve, deny it. So we began discussing ESC recently is, do you want that practice to continue, or would you prefer it to be, we make you aware of this is what we've approved or denied through Ed Services?
And John, if I may, because the newer board members may have needed to learn what I needed to learn, could you just spell out the specificity of the parameters that we follow for that tier 3? And the reason why I raise it with you is it's already been vetted through a significant process that involves all of us. And we are following what we believe is the direction of the board in terms of the parameters. The part that I think sends the message, which is confusing from my seat, but not one that I would be worried if you wanted to continue it. It's just that once we've gone through that whole process, we actually use all of our senior admin time to follow the parameters. We would, of course, inform you of whatever decision was made, but it's one of those things where if it comes here and we communicate to you how we have followed those parameters, it becomes a pretty challenging conversation if for whatever reason there's a no, unless it's clear we haven't followed one of the parameters. So for me, that's where from a governance perspective, it just raised some questions. Well, of course, we'll follow the parameters. If you want the parameters changed, that's your purview to change. But in terms of implementation, if we feel we followed them and you feel we haven't, then obviously that is information I would always need to hear. But it's one of those things where when we're talking 4 and 5 months, timelines, communities, if different issues that emerge. But when I realized how specific the parameters are,
Right.
that made me realize, well, okay, there's a pretty narrow lane for a good reason that we need to stay in relationship to these approvals. Go ahead.
Right, in the itineraries, the fingerprinting, the chaperone ratio, which we have spelled out in our AR, the first aid, the cell phones, the funding, the supervision requirements, all of it is laid out. And then we decide whether we think the trip is something that is instructional value that cannot be, you cannot find here locally. It's a trip that cannot be done here in the Bay Area. And thus, we're very tight on that. We have many conversations with the site. We're not going to do a trip out of state that we can do, in Southern California. So we work through that. And then those would be bumped to a category 2 trip, which is an overnight trip down in Southern California, something like that. So we're very careful on that. Yep.
Any process when you're looking at improving it or diving into why is it the way it is, I think you have to look at any step. Does it add value? And do we add any value? And from all the years when we kind of picked this apart a few years ago, I was under the impression that out of state, our approval was a requirement coming from above through Ed Code. If that's not the case or no longer the case, I don't really see what value our step is except potentially being a cog in it. So as long as we've confirmed that that requirement doesn't exist, I'm fine with simplifying it.
And we certainly are verifying that. And obviously, if there was any type of Ed Code requirement, we would, sorry, I'm going to take this back so I don't have to lean in. We would not bring it forward to you. We actually have that question. We can't find it at this moment. But the other thing that I think is important, though, something new emerges in the community. You're hearing that the parameters something. Then we just have a discussion and you actually pass a direction that says we need to add additional parameters because X and Y emerged and it's not covered. Like that is a really significant, in my book, important governance discussion to have because you're setting the parameters. we're implementing the parameters. And if for whatever reason we don't implement the parameters effectively, then I would expect to be called to account on that. But the fact that we walk through the process, ensure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, fulfill what the direction is, and then it comes here, then what I am wishing to avoid is, well, if you said no, fair enough, it's because we haven't, in your mind, aligned with the parameters. And that's where I would ask for you to consider, you set the direction, we'll implement the direction, happy to receive feedback if you feel that the direction isn't followed, but it just takes a step out that allows for us to not do anything but facilitate that process. Obviously, would not come back to you unless we had every T crossed on. Is there any other legal piece that we haven't been able to find? But other than that, thank you for that insight.
And related, I remember discussions in the past about, needing approval for kids going to, say, a tournament or a competition in Reno, which was closer than San Diego, that kind of thing. And that's why I seem to remember there was some, hiccup, some issue related to crossing state lines and different laws and different rules. But if that doesn't exist, why go there?
Yeah, if I can, just to concur, we've talked about this a couple of times about 3 years ago, I think it was, just before the pandemic. And the initial issue was, again, part of the parameters of what kind of trips were allowed or what kind of trips were not allowed. So if you're just going to play in an invitational tournament, for instance, as opposed to a championship tournament, why would we be going out of state for something like that? And then we had left off some things, like some of the arts related type of things that'll be like up in Oregon, for instance, and so made some adjustments. Along with Rachel, I'm fine with us not having to see every single one and have it held up. The only thing that I would be looking for is, and not even a level of notification, but when there are issues with the parameters or any feedback from a particular trip that we should know about, because we have had issues in the past, and that's one of the reasons why we were looking at those parameters before, is to make sure that we're still all aligned on, the direction that staff's been given around these out-of-state trips. But again, I think it is worthwhile to look and see if there's anything else in Ed Code that talks about out-of-state as opposed to just within state.
And certainly, should you make this decision, I commit to ensuring that you know all information that emerges. I will say with a smile under my mask that the parameters are such that our team is quite strict in terms of the approval of these particular trips for very valid reasons. And I can say that because as the person who came in newest to this process, it is a rigorous process that if you really want to do things out of state, you got to pass this guy.
Yes, we have in our entire ed service team. And so,
Saying that with a little.
And there was probably a reaction to some problems that
Right.
kind of kept coming up with behavior
Yeah.
related
Yes.
to out-of-state trips. That was the impetus, which we all remember. Well, some of us remember.
So I've had the benefit of doing an out-of-country trip as a chaperone to the choral group in San Ramon Valley High School. So I know how important it was an incredibly memorable and amazing trip for all the students. There were some behavioral issues in the middle of the night, but we handled all that. I would just ask about during the time of COVID, if the kids are taking these trips, what kind of expectations around safety will we have if they're in a different state and maybe that state doesn't have the same parameters as we do for COVID and how they deal with it?
That's a great question, Trustee Clark, and I'm glad you went on those trips. We follow the guidelines of where the trip is, and we, as you know, and this isn't necessarily time, took some very strong precautions during COVID with our own school trips, et cetera. So we work closely with the county, the state they're going to, and make sure that all those guidelines are followed. As we understand, some of those may be less than what we follow here in Contra Costa County. But we follow those provisions, and that's part of what the process is, to make sure that it's properly communicated to any stakeholder that wants their son, daughter, child to go, that these are the guidelines we follow. And so that has been very clear in our trips as they plan those. You're welcome.
Yeah, I agree that having that additional step of fitting into a board meeting approval, that when it really is operational, makes complete sense. I would be curious if we could have a chance, especially as new board members, to see the policy in place and the procedure, just to look at it and review it, and then when we do have that on the agenda with looking at changing, that we have a chance to have a conversation around that if necessary.
I'll do two things, and I can do it before the Friday update. I can send it to you this afternoon, or we have a matrix that we've created that is more user-friendly for our sites. I'll include that, and the policy with some of the notations that is in our AR as well.
And just for our community, assuming that there's a green light to proceed through discussion, when we put together the actual report, we'll include all of this information so that our community has access to all of the ways in which this gets decided as well.
Okay, yeah, and I agree with with Rachel and Ken that before in the past when we were looking at the trips and stuff, it was certain issues and things that come up, or actually not even issues, maybe complexities, right, with regards to the trips. And I had also assumed that because through ed code and things like that, that it was mandatory, right? It was required to come to a board. But if you don't find anything with regards to that, and district is following very strict parameters, don't want the extra step to be, another hindrance, right, on the field trip process. So, okay.
So what we'll do is, again, we will confirm that last legal piece, because I had some initial discussions previously, but it was this morning in cabinet where it merged again because we were working through something. And I will be sure to confirm that. If I find that it's not something we can do with ed code, then I'll simply let you know we're not doing it. If I find that there's no other parameters regarding ed code that we have to be concerned about, we'll put together a proper report that comes to an upcoming board meeting, and you'll be able to deal with it in that context. So thank you.
Just one other quick question. The 4-month time frame, how do you see that changing? Because I know that was also an issue with, last minute requests and things like that, and how they're handled, and whether you envision any changes to the process itself from a timing perspective.
Thank you, Trustee Mintz. That is something that if this moves forward, then Ms. Garardo and our ESC team would add that to one of the parameters so that they have to get that timeline to ESC in X number of months. I don't have the exact, I think 4 was a little long in terms of some events and examples. We had a robotics championship team at Doherty Valley that was not within that time period, but we were able to make it work because those things happened. But I think we would move the timeline to the ESC portion. I don't have the exact date yet.
So I think, if I may, my expectation sitting in this seat would be that there is enough time to be safe, to be organized, and to be clear. It probably doesn't need 4 and 5 months, truthfully, from my own experience and perspective, but I would never want to change the culture to we start receiving applications of this magnitude in a short period of time that doesn't allow all of the checklists of safety, communication, and such to be followed. But I think we can adjust it a little bit, and we'll think about that before we bring the report forward, because what we would want to put as a proposal to the AR, to the admin regulations, is what we're thinking about that, so that you know exactly what our plan is going forward. But at this point, President Ordway, I'm hearing that there's an openness to us taking this to the next level. We'll have some discussion as a cabinet. We'll talk to legal. And then if everything is fine, we'll put together a report that puts this back in front of you in a formal board meeting setting.
Yes, great.
Thanks.
Sounds good. Okay. Okay, so we're back to then Assistant Superintendent Garardo, resolutions.
Sure. Thank you, President Ordway, and good afternoon, trustees. I'm actually really excited to be here today. Back in August, we brought you a proposed list of our 21-22 district resolutions, and at that time, you gave us some great direction to really be able to come back to a boardwalk workshop setting and have some fruitful discussion around those resolutions. So we're going to take that opportunity today. So what you have in front of you are two documents, our actual resolutions that we actually do in San Ramon Valley Unified School District in blue on the list. And the remaining resolutions are the recommended resolution titles that are from the CDE website. So it's a pretty long list of resolutions, but it does encompass all the different resolutions that the state of California has put forth as things that you can consider. So that being said, today we wanted to spend some time really in two areas. One, being able to go through and take a look month by month at the resolutions we celebrate, and for you to have some discussion around the ones you'd like us to continue, if there's ones you'd like us to add or to consider or to think about adding to the list, we'd be able to do that today. And then the second part of our discussion to really talk about the board presentations and how those really, what they look like, what they entail, your expectations of us to be able to celebrate and honor the resolutions that we're bringing forth. So I want to be mindful of sharing too, along with that second piece, not only the district celebrations, but also the celebrations that take place at the school site. Because part of what has happened in the past with our resolutions list is in an effort to be able to have our schools be prepared and properly celebrate the resolutions, we often bring the resolution to you a month prior to the actual resolution being honored. So for instance, Hispanic Heritage Month actually is honored, it's the first one that I have on our list from this year, September 15th to October 15th, but we bring it to you in an August board meeting to share out. And in that meeting, what we have found is we're not able to really recognize and honor all the things that are happening at our school site because they haven't occurred yet. So we wanted to have a little discussion today about what that presentation looks like, when you'd like us to bring those, if that means adjusting some of our calendar dates and the way by which we present. We are happy to do that and want to be able to just absolutely honor and be able to present on behalf of these resolutions in a way that is of value to our community and to all of you. So President Orway, I'd love to turn it over to you. And if we want to start by just going month by month and looking at the resolutions that we currently have in place, and then the other resolutions that are honored that month as well, we can start there if you'd like and have some discussion.
Okay, yeah, no, that's good. So the list, I mean, it starts in September, right? And the as it says, the blue ones, blue highlighted ones are the ones that we currently, right?
Yes.
Um,
So for the month of August, we honor currently, the only two that we honor are Attendance Awareness Month and Hispanic Heritage Month. But if you look on the state recommended list, there are several additional resolutions that could be considered if the board chooses to do so. So I can give you a few minutes if you'd like to take a look at that and feel free to discuss. some
Can
of
I
these
can
and-
I pipe in? Sorry, just from more
Absolutely.
from like a high level look at resolutions. I think that so as I look through the list, there's several overlapping resolutions that don't necessarily fit in the same month. So like, for example, the general idea of climate change. And then there's several kind of specific, what I'm going to call holiday type of resolutions like Earth Day and John Muir Day. And there was a third one. The resolution itself and climate change, I think, kind of transcends these individual kind of moments in the year, but yet maybe there's a way to have, for example, with this a climate change resolution that is a resolution on climate change, and then we talk about that on one of those days, and then that kind of involves all of those so-called, I know they're not holidays, but like specific date or week type of things. And then also with the idea of there's Teacher Appreciation Day, there's, Classified Appreciation Week, kind of looking at, can we look at those as they're all weeks instead of, so that we kind of look more categorically rather than specific what's happening on it, on a specific month or day. Those are just some kind of high level thoughts that I had.
So if we were going to do that, Laura, like you said, climate change, that encompasses certain things. then we'll have to go through basically ticking that and then go through, as you already brought up a couple, then we'll just go through
Yeah,
and go through it by, so instead of by month, then,
For some, I mean, I think that there's, as I kind of looked at the list and as I see resolutions and the purpose of resolutions, I see them as celebrating specific moments. I also see them as celebrating cultures, as celebrating communities, and and kind of pushing ideas, right? Like climate change, school safety, diversity and inclusion, those types of things. So while, for example, there's a Pride Month, there isn't necessarily a school safety month, right? But there is things that we can talk about and kind of create resolutions around that have to do with school safety or climate change. So, I mean, that's kind of that, again, that categorical type of.
And I do think too, Trustee Bratt, what you're bringing up is the piece around the content of the actual resolution. And so we can do it one of two ways, and I'm happy to do it however you guys choose. But I know we're going to need to come back at some point, which I failed to mention at the beginning of this, for a second meeting to talk about the content of each of those resolutions. So once we isolate the topics, to your point, absolutely the things that we want to choose to add that support or would be beneficiary to add to that certain resolution, I think we could do within. Another piece of this resolution process will be to rewrite some of the resolutions that we currently have in place. We've revised them, but we obviously want to have more of a workshop model to be able to take all the resolutions that we choose and to go a little bit more in depth with them.
Yeah, and I think in that too, then we might find that we can combine, so that we don't have multiple overlapping resolutions.
okay. So,
If I can just add to
Yeah.
that, I guess the key to me is, as mentioned, there are different types of resolutions. There are those that acknowledge people, for instance, as opposed to the ones that would have an effect on what we expect in the classroom to occur in terms of an educational opportunity for our students. And so that's where, yeah, if we were to combine some of these so that we can set a clear expectation about, and I think we've always said, it's not about this only being the one day that we practice
Right.
anti-bullying, for instance, but we really want to have a focus. And that's why we have some of these on the list. One of the things I know in the past, at least, we've really tried to kind of limit the number of resolutions we do so it doesn't get out of hand with an expectation that we're going to have a resolution on everything.
Well, and I think that creates a weight to it too when.
Yeah. But
Right.
I think it gets back to, particularly from an ed services perspective, of what we're asking our staff to do relative to not just knowing that the board has passed a resolution, but actually having an expectation that in fact could come back to us with some feedback about how we actually perform.
right, at the school sites and things, how to support, right, the resolution. Okay. So I guess, yeah, if we're to come back to talk about the contents, and so maybe it's just in interest of time, because I can see if we take a general resolution idea, whatever content, whatever, then we would have to actually go through several times, right, on the months. So maybe just for interest of time, we'll go through the months and then discuss in our second, on the next workshop on resolutions, on actual content and how we can incorporate some of those. Right?
Can I just add one point, though?
Sure.
I know that all of the PTA folks that have been busy working on Words Matter Week
Mhm.
are very interested in an outcome of today, of us telling them thumbs up on that day. I've had several of them say, are we gonna, because they keep tuning into our meetings and then we don't get to it because they really
Right,
don't know that for
right.
their planning. So just want to put that out there, that's kind of an outcome we need to hold ourselves to today.
Okay, so so going back to that August, let's go through month by month. And August, so currently, yeah, we have attendance awareness month, and then a Hispanics Heritage Month. And we're looking at some of the other August.
So, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. When I see the International Literacy Day, like, is it day? And then I think about Read Across America, and I think about, some other kind of pieces throughout the year. So while I don't necessarily believe that International Literacy Day in September is the right one, but kind of putting a pin on that and realizing that maybe there's a way for us to celebrate that at a different point with a more generalized resolution or something that's specific to a different day or week or month around literacy.
Okay, great. I agree with the literacy.
One that jumped out for me in that time period was Constitution and citizenship. Whether it's that particular day or not, one thing, particularly with everything that's been going on in this past year or so, when I'm talking about citizenship with Scouts, for instance, to me, one of the most important days is Inauguration Day, which isn't on this list at all. Now, it only occurs every 4 years. However, what is supposed to be, the peaceful transition of power is the basis of our democracy. And we've seen some issues with that. And I think it's important that we, again, maybe it's not tied to a day, but maybe back to the board in terms of how we're working with civic education at different levels. And if it was a day, maybe that puts a little bit more emphasis on how we're actually instructing kids. It's not just a high school history class, for instance, or social studies. It's something that's going on across the district.
Well, and I think it again is more of that maybe generalized kind of resolution around citizenship, around governance and citizenship and those types of things.
And I wouldn't be surprised if the reason it's in September, why it would have landed there is it's lining up with when you would be doing voter registration drives
Right.
and things like that for it to be in that early fall timeframe.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Anything else in that month? No? If not, then let's see for,
Yes,
You're
for October, I have a summarized list here, which might be a little bit easier than the list you're
Oh,
looking at, President Ordway. But for October, in the month of September, we honor Dyslexia Awareness Month and National Bullying Prevention Month. So those two would occur in September, the presentation traditionally, and then would be honored in October. So you can go ahead and take a look at October resolutions, which traditionally we would honor the month before, but we could look at any additions or changes to those from those. Oh, my apologies. And Red Ribbon Week is also part of October. So there's 3. It's not a resolution, but it's a presentation we do. So
Isn't there also Digital Citizenship Week and School Administrators Week? Those are in blue for October also.
yes, they are.
Yeah, and where is it? National Safe Schools Week. Again, this idea of school safety, it doesn't necessarily have to be that week, but I think that that having a resolution around school safety and with the opportunity to focus on that is important.
In looking at some of the other resolutions that other school districts are doing, I came across our Yellow Ribbon Week, which is prevention of school violence. That was a resolution that was in January. Not that we would have to do that, but I think the school safety issue is an important one, and it's one that we should pay attention to and have some sort of resolution, whether it's that particular kind or something else.
And then there's the general one, National Child Safety and Protection. I mean, it's just interesting how these all evolve, how
right?
they're overlapping. And
Yeah.
I also came across, we have National Hispanic Heritage Month. I came across National Latinx Heritage Month, and I wasn't sure whether they renamed it, but we might want to think about that.
I can comment that this is one of those very significant issues that whenever I personally have broached this topic, it is challenging. It causes great emotion and significant reactions from those, not myself, who don't identify as either, but for those who do. So we can take that back, but just letting you know that this is quite a sensitive topic, one that we aren't afraid to lean into, but it's not so simple to navigate based upon those really significant views that members of our community hold.
Yeah.
So if you have any
that.
thoughts on that, when we, we would love your thoughts, but just know that we have kind of been exploring this, and it's not easy, as you could probably imagine.
I would suspect the same thing is true of African American History Month in terms of changing names over time and what people feel comfortable with.
I could assume that you're probably right, Trustee Mins. The issue around Hispanic and Latina, Latino, and Latinx, though, is one that is a little bit more prevalent, at least in our context at the moment. But that doesn't mean that what you're saying is untrue.
Okay.
I just wanted to speak to the idea again of the overlapping resolutions, and I think that it's an opportunity for us when there are those months that are really dense, like it looks like October is, that then maybe those weeks or days or whatever, that the resolutions that overlap with a month that maybe isn't as dense, we can kind of shift over. So just once we get everything kind of set up, looking at how the timeline is on the calendar, I think would be valuable.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Yeah, for me, it's almost for even make a difference day. To make a difference day that's tying into, in a general, more general context. The citizenship, that we're talking about. So that for me, we can kind of consider whether or not that would fit in with, again, this Constitution and Citizenship Day, or in a general theme of that would be great.
Yeah, and with that, and I didn't see it on here, but in my research prior, there's a high school voters education week. There's one in April and one in September. And so again, these are these opportunities that we can just bundle them together and have one week or month that we really focus on this kind of civic citizenship government education stuff. Is it in? It's open.
Yes. Okay, and then looks like, and anything else for October? Not November.
For November, it is just one resolution, which is National Native American Heritage Month.
One of the other ones I came across in November was Substitute Educators Day. And I guess I was thinking about that because we're depending so heavily on our substitutes, and it would be a nice way for us to be able to honor their service to the district and to our students.
I bullet pointed the California Sikh American Awareness and Appreciation Month. I think that it's as much as we can important to kind of, cast that wide net around all cultures. We are reaching, or, we do celebrate Latinx and African American and, various things. So when we have opportunities for specific cultural groups, I think it would behoove us to do that.
Well, in that vein, then I'd like to jump back to October, sorry, for the Filipino American History Month.
Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, Cindy?
In December, they have National Special Education Day, and we in April have an Autism Awareness Month. And I want to make sure that we encompass everyone. And would it be better to acknowledge Special Education Day rather than just
Right,
Autism
okay.
Awareness Day? Just a question for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we can definitely have a discussion around that.
And that's where it gets tricky because we're trying to like shine a light on particular situations and challenges. And not everyone who has autism, not everyone who has dyslexia actually is eligible for special education. So then there's special education versus special needs. And it just,
Yeah,
we need to do that thoughtfully. That's all.
I would agree. I mean, I think that that's to me, I see that more in the vein of different cultures, I guess, if you will, rather than, ideas. Like civics to me is an idea, and, African American, Latinx, those are cultures. And I see autism, special education, dyslexia is different, different things in a way.
Right. And I think those particular resolutions, autism and dyslexia awareness, those two at least, are specific enough that they're about education and potentially pushing change, I guess. So they're sort of advocacy, they're awareness, but they're also advocacy.
The one macro comment I'll add as you're having your discussion is, and I'm guessing you've had the same experience, those elected bodies who have long lists of resolutions tend to only focus at a meeting that it happens to be that month. Those that have fewer resolutions, the expectation that it's not just happening in a boardroom or a council chamber or beyond, but actually in the community, in our case, schools, can become greater. So part of what I hope you'll consider as you work through this is, for some things, maybe you're perfectly fine that it's just acknowledged at a board meeting in October with a resolution, a presentation, and our community experiences us that way. For other things, and I realize this is the further discussion, you might have pretty strong feelings that there should be school-based activity and some follow-up and some communication regarding what took place. I would just ask, and I'm sure you're aware of this, that those then be smaller in number so that we're not overwhelming schools with multiple resolutions, which unfortunately then lose their impact. So it's totally within your purview, but I have found that the correlation between influence beyond the meeting is directly connected to how many resolutions are on the table. So probably common sense, but I thought I'd just offer that.
Yeah, thank
Well,
you.
and somehow trying to address that, I think in some instances, like in the ones where you're trying to cause change with a resolution, once the district starts to make that change and it becomes part of our fabric, it will always be a little hard of, okay, do we need the resolution anymore? We're already doing the work. And maybe on some, I think acceptance of cultures, that would probably have to go on forever. But I'm thinking back on the autism awareness and the dyslexia awareness. Part of it is just getting it on the radar. And then if it becomes part of what we do now, it doesn't necessarily need to be a resolution forever. Does that make sense?
The one question I would have in terms of the cultural recognition days is how deeply we cut it. So we have a couple that are listed on this list that we're not putting resolutions forward today, but if we were to add those, is going to be a greater expectation for each of the different sects of India, for instance, to have separate days, or European type days and things of that nature? Or is there something about the ones that we've already included? And is there something we need to do to talk about cultural awareness in general and really focus on the diversity of culture instead of necessarily all the individual cultures? That gets back to your point about, how do we combine or not? some of
Right.
these
Like,
things.
does Filipino Heritage Month fit
Okay,
under
under-
Asian American heritage, so on, and not to at all be implying that I'm for discounting anything, but if we're trying not to have too broad a focus, how do we appropriately combine, but not just bury things, right?
I think back to years ago, made a big deal about celebrating Lincoln's birthday and Washington's birthday instead, and there's a Ronald Reagan Day on this list. Instead, across the country, changed it to President's Day and just left it at that. So a combined single day.
Well, and maybe it's having a resolution, and I use that word as opposed to awareness type of celebration type of thing, resolution on how we as a district support diversity and culture and those types of things, and then have the more celebratory awareness to specific, um, large groups of culture, affinity groups or that type of thing, maybe.
Yeah, does that have to be a board resolution, or do we kind of cover it with a cultural awareness resolution and then individual practices, getting back to the curriculum?
So, yeah, should, I guess, should we have that as part of the discussion next time? Give kind of some thoughts on that, because yeah, in order to be inclusive, right, we had to look big. We have to go everyone. But we also don't want to, yeah, lose sight of the individual too. And so, yeah, have to kind of, I think, give that kind of a thought, and maybe we can come back in the next, yeah, to maybe discuss in specifically.
Yeah, well, and maybe there's a way to have a broad resolution that, that pushes the idea of supporting diversity within different cultures. And then in that resolution, we list some of the days and the weeks and the months, or, maybe just the specific more niche days, and then still have those opportunities where we have the monthly presentation on Hispanic Heritage Week, or African American History Week, or month, those types of things. But where we're calling out, and we have the opportunity to call out those really, more specific groups, but not making it be every month there's 12 of them. It's this one resolution that lists those, maybe.
Yeah. That might be yeah, that might be an idea. And I know that we already do in the school site awareness celebrations. So that's also a little different, right? With our celebrations and awareness versus, right, board resolution. Okay. Let's see, anything else in December?
So I also had that special education day.
I had that too on my list to add.
Yeah. Right, or at least kind of pin, and then we'll talk about whether or not to, yeah, to incorporate with autism awareness. Okay.
And there's the, election day, which again kind of goes into that bucket of the various things. And maybe it is that day because that is something that's every year. That then we talk about all of the variety of civics and voter education. But
Yeah, the only question that I would have about focus on election day is not making it more political than it ought to be, and opening that door.
no, that's very
So
true.
trying to be more constitution and civics oriented rather than political.
Yeah, it's probably better instead of the election day. I think one of the ones that we may be looking at anyway is like high school voter education.
Yeah.
Right, it's more education and
Or about Constitution and citizenship.
right, Constitution. Mhm.
Constitution week, it's just the same week. Did we pin National Child Safety Protection Month of November? It's at one point you said
Yeah,
National
she's-
Safety Day, and then I called it I think down
Oh,
bus one, so.
yeah, there's a school safety week in October. But again, I think that the resolution kind of, is more than just awareness for a week, I feel. So maybe that's one of those overlap. Maybe it's not specific to school, maybe it's student safety.
Okay, yeah, so pinning the national, like, child safety and protection. Okay. think we're going into January now then, right? In January, do we have, I don't think the district has, or we don't have one. Okay, so in January, is there anything? January short.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to February, unless there's any additions. any
So I
discussion.
had Career Technical Education Month.
Right.
I think we need to, it would be a good time to highlight our career technical education program. And it's something that I don't think that we've highlighted a lot. And I think it's an important part of our students' education. And it would be a good one to add.
I agree.
I do too. Okay. Okay, so we'll mark that down. And let's see, February. Oh, yeah. So Words Matter Week. Right, but you didn't mention that. That's in February. It's already a board resolution.
Can I make a suggestion? That perhaps we remove the National Bullying Prevention Month in October, and then, this is just a thought, I don't know, it's just off the top of my head, but, and then that Words Matter Week really becomes more than, it becomes about anti-bullying, and it becomes, we kind of go beyond the specific words matter. Just a thought.
I think Words Matter Week is also sorry, I think Words Matter Week is also an opportunity to talk about microaggressions and those kind of things that people may be doing and they don't even realize that they're doing. Just a
Mhm.
inward look about words matter.
Yeah.
Right.
And it seems like PTA has really leveraged that Words Matter Week, and so maybe it's an opportunity for us to use that as opposed to use it a previous month where there isn't quite as much engagement around it.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. That's February. Anything else for February? Oh, it's in March. We have 3.
Well, one that we've celebrated off and on is the Read Across America Day.
Yeah.
And it used to be a bigger deal. And maybe combining that with just overall literacy
Literacy.
might be a good
Mhm.
opportunity to bring some of that back.
Right. Because that was an international literacy, right? So,
Yeah, and
yeah.
my bringing up that was really to kind of use that Read Across America, which again is something that our district does amplify and use, and so use that day to talk about literacy and to talk about those things that maybe are on this calendar on other days and weeks, but have that day be all about that.
Mhm.
That one actually already is a celebration, so it
Right.
doesn't really add
Right.
more work. It's already happening.
Right.
And it's fun.
And yes, that's right.
So I had a few pins. I had the National Nutrition Month. I mean, these are just ideas, not
Mhm.
necessarily something that we need to add to the pile, but and then International Day of Racial Discrimination. And I have that, with this idea, not necessarily of that specific day, but this idea of having a resolution that is about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so then, that's the concept. And then maybe it is picking a day or a week or a month that circles us around that concept, but really driving home that concept of diversity, inclusion, and belonging within one of these days. And it doesn't necessarily have to be International Day of Racial Discrimination. And then I also had Cesar Chavez Day. Again, I think that especially in California, is a very an opportunity to really talk about the history of labor specifically within our state. So
I just don't know if we need to have a particular resolution for something that's already a state holiday, for instance.
it's true.
And how it ties back to, for instance, Hispanic American history, and really, again, focusing that there. The whole labor movement is part of that as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Anything else from Mark that we see? Okay, in April, we talked about Autism Awareness Month and so School Library Month. That's highlighted or that's bold. So,
Our librarians have asked to add that.
oh,
Yeah, and I
that's
have that.
What the
pinned
bold
too.
significance is that we've had a request for that. Okay.
okay.
The other one I came across in April that I think would be not necessarily something that maybe requires action, but that acknowledges our community. And I'm probably biased when it comes to this because I've spent literally thousands of hours volunteering in our public schools. But Public School Volunteer Week, our district depends so much on the volunteers from our community, not only giving of their time, but of their resources and their funds. And I think it would be a good acknowledgement from the board and from the district that we honor them that week.
Great
No,
suggestion.
yeah, that is a great suggestion.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
I agree. And I would again pull back a little bit to that kind of categorical.
Mhm.
Can we ensure that we have volunteer, and I that it should all be weeks as opposed to days or month. Volunteer week, teacher week, appreciation week, teacher appreciation week, classified appreciation week, administrator appreciation week, just to make sure that we're really kind of getting that the breadth of all of that. So that's my suggestion. And then in April, I want to put out that idea of the climate change resolution, bringing in the National Environmental Education Week, John Muir Day, and Earth Day. Just picking whether it's it looks like they're all within the same week. So that week having a whatever the title of it is, but to have a resolution around climate change and supporting our environment. And then it looks like there is in April too, there is that Administrative Professionals Week. I don't know if that's the right one, if there's a different one, but
Because I think there's.
We have
also-
traditionally captured it under Classified Appreciation
okay,
Week,
okay.
but and Keith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is how we have captured all of the different roles and responsibilities across our classified unit.
So the principals and the superintendents and those folks, those all fit under classified rather than administrative.
So we have,
We have a school. Actually, we have a school administrator.
yeah, we have school administrator
Okay.
week.
Okay, great.
October.
Yeah. So we have school administrator certificate or school administrator week, week of the October. We have
Then there's
classified
also a school-
appreciation week.
Okay, so the
And teacher
administrative
appreciation.
professionals is different
Yes.
than what I was thinking. Okay.
And then there's a school principals day listed in May too. So it's like, we should probably pick one, and I like your suggestion of a week for each of the employee groups, because I've always thought it's been strange how
Some
We
get a
have
day. some
one's a
get
day, one's a month.
Yeah.
It always kind of feels a little awkward in the boardroom when we're looking at each of the units and we're like, okay, you have a day and you have a month, and not really our control. It came from somewhere else, but
Yes, sounds good. Well, gonna take a look and. Okay.
then if you look further down in May, there's
Yeah.
nurses, have a day, speech pathologists have a day, do psychologists have, I mean, it's,
Yeah. So
Now,
yeah, same thing. We
when
should
you're
take
trying to
it as
create
a,
awareness about what they
Got it.
do, I see why it's different because their jobs are different. But
right,
we don't want to do some of them and not all, and
Right.
have people feel
Right, no,
excluded. That's for
uh,
sure.
yeah.
Exactly. I think the big buckets.
Yeah.
And then if a school site, I mean, because they would have that flexibility, right? If they wanted to, yeah.
Good. Yes, we want to include everyone. Okay.
In an effort to make sure that I've captured, when you take a look at the certificated, the school administrator, and the classified, would you like to consider encompassing all those? And I heard you say the universal piece, month, day, or week. And then thinking of a way to more globally include nurses, psychologists, social workers. I mean, we could go down the list of all the providers that serve our students. So maybe we can have a little discussion on how we,
And educators, and then
Yes.
using some of the language that we even use in the contract, right?
Mhm.
yes.
And I think we do some of that already. In the
And then part of the
resolution.
resolution could even be educators include blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
Right,
I think we may already do some of that already, but maybe just expand it.
Mm.
Counselors too.
Yeah.
There's a
that's
separate day
counselor.
somewhere for them too, isn't there?
Yeah, we
Yes.
do have a National School Counseling Week, but to me, that's different than a counselor appreciation. That's more about, shining a light on counseling for our students, our community rather than, right? I could be wrong about this, but this is kind of the way I'm seeing that versus it's not National Counselor Appreciation Week.
And I guess what I would
Yeah.
look at would be, when we get back to content, what something like that would actually look
Yeah,
like.
because if we want to keep it as appreciation by job duties, then we might want to go broader on school counseling week and have it be more general on mental health or mental wellness
Yes.
Mhm.
so that it's
It's
bigger.
Encompasses the whole.
Yeah,
And
it's
I-
not about appreciation. It's about
Yes.
the
Yes.
the importance of
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then June just have one. That's nothing in for July, yes.
Did we do May? Did we talk about May? Did I miss it?
Just kind of generally. with
Okay,
no
okay.
Specific if you missed one.
I
Can I
would,
share
I,
something?
I would ask, and I guess this, we already have this note, but that instead of California Day of the Teacher, that we do the National Teacher Appreciation Week, we swap those out. And then with the National Mental Health Month, that we really use that to, like what you were discussing, to kind of bring in
Mhm.
as much as we can so that, talking about, yeah.
Mhm.
And then I also had the high school voter education week,
Mhm.
weeks in April or September. And again, I think to that idea of if that's when we talk about the civic governance, citizenship, or if it's something that we just create and we're not picking a name that's from this list, but we're creating a week when we want to focus on that.
Or is that just an activity as part of, something that's listed in terms of, general civics? awareness? So it gets back to content.
So if you like, President Ordway, I could have Ms. Fisher go through our list and we could start to just summarize everything that we've kind of highlighted and then maybe begin to think about how we want to group, add, change wording of on a more global stance. And then we can come back and have kind of the second discussion around the celebrations and actually and the resolutions, what they look like at the district level versus the school site level.
Right, okay, yes.
Would you like to be my guest and take us through that list? Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
You're welcome. So on the broader level, I have a citizenship, civic governance, school safety, Staff Acknowledgement Week. I'm using that as a general catch-all. I have a resolution on diversity and cultural awareness. And then I have something on special education, but I wasn't sure where you wanted to go. If we wanted to look at special education and include dyslexia and autism in that, or if we wanted to add special education in addition to dyslexia and autism. I have Words Matter Week encompassing bullying. Let's see what else I have. I think that captures, in addition to some of the others that we wanted to continue with, there was a couple. There was an add School Library Month, Public School Volunteer Week, which we could include in Acknowledgement Week. We could put that over there in acknowledgement. And Read Across America would include literacy, and add Career Tech Education Month. Have I missed anything? Does that encompass most?
I think, did you catch the volunteer one?
Yes.
Yeah, she.
And you got the climate change.
Thank you. And climate change, which would include John Muir, Earth Day, supporting the environment.
And I'm just wondering if that's a, like the National Environmental Education Week with the climate change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's that week, and then we talk about all things in
Yeah,
that
'cause
one single
unfortunately,
solution.
called climate change, we get in trouble with some of our.
Right.
communities.
No, you're right. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of clarify too with the staff appreciation week. My thought was that it would be each category would have a separate week, that it wouldn't be a single week that everyone was celebrating everyone. I don't know if that was others' intent, but
Yeah. Yes, I-
Do we want to go through, Trustee Brett, those groups? Then I think that might be helpful. So we make sure we capture everyone. I wouldn't want to miss someone so that we can encompass all.
So on my notes for that, I had volunteers, administration, classified, and teachers. Certificate.
Educators, right?
Educators. Did I catch everyone?
Shelley had a substitute at one
Oh,
point. I don't know if we
substitutes.
would want to
That's right.
also do that. I
Shall we add them to this section?
mean, you could also envision where it's a week and you focus on each one
Yeah.
during the day or
Right.
something.
And if
I
you're talking
was-
about the educators, maybe you have some special part of that and substitutes within that.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea of a
And
a
maybe
solid
we
week
even
and then-
separate out teachers and then all the other categories or something. I'm just thinking about how it gets celebrated at a site. And the number, I just, I'm also thinking like about how the people that usually put that on, put it on. So I remember it often used to come up that Teacher Appreciation Day landed at the same time, or week rather, landed at the same time as many of the PTA leaders were at their convention. And it was always kind of onerous of how are we going to pull this off if these people, I mean, part of it is planning, but that gets into which week we pick. And the national week is
Right.
different than the California Day of the Teacher. It's just kind of funny how it all is different.
In having 1 week with each day be a celebration, would that take away from any group having, like when I think of like Teacher Appreciation Week, it's, Monday, it's, bring in a drawing, Tuesday, it's, this
True.
and those kinds of things. So if we do kind of combine it with that, would that take away from really being able to focus on the,
Particular.
the particular group?
Well, I think if we do focus on educator and then break down within educators, I think there's some possibility of doing it that way.
Yeah.
I
And-
think if
and
we were
without
doing a
having to-
whole week and the expectation was an activity every day for every category, I think we'd really wear people out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be too much because a lot of times for the teachers and things, I know when my kids were in elementary school, we would show up every day with something for the teacher. And then if you're adding on all these other people each day, it's like, yeah, and you have a couple, 3 kids, it would be a lot.
And given that the kids are probably have the most contact with a classroom teacher,
Mhm.
I could see making the argument for having a week of classroom teacher and then maybe a dedicated for each of the others, as long as it doesn't cause strife on campuses of, well, these folks got 5 days and these goes 1. I mean, just like where, how do you split that baby? Because in elementary school, the different activity every day is really fun, and each piece of it isn't taxing. It's just you don't want other staff to say, what am I? I'm 1 day versus 5 days. So I just think we need to look to staff to help give us some feedback about how that might go over.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is if we just had an educators week where we celebrated all educators and still hold on to day of teacher and really put focus on that as a separate activity too.
But yeah, no, and yeah, and if there's any feedback, from the staff, that'd be great.
We can reach out and get some feedback around that as well and bring that back.
Yeah, because we want to, it's like what we tell the kids, right? What we do for is for them, but it's always nice to make sure that that's what they want.
Right. Okay. So I think we have a pretty comprehensive list. So thank you for taking us through that process. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about was just kind of the district level presentations, the timing of those, along with how you point out some of the school celebrations that take place. Because a lot of the things that happen that we want to honor and celebrate in addition to the awareness piece is the things that are going on our school campuses. So we can have some conversation around kind of the district awareness presentations, honoring of the resolutions, and then things that we want to kind of fall or naturally already fall at the school site and are happening right now. So I don't know if there's any broad categories you want to go through, if there's certain parameters or things that you want to look for globally that occur kind of in district level presentations versus site-based ones, and kind of navigate it from that perspective, or
I think
open
maybe
for
just
discussion.
to think about it a little or talk about it. I mean, I don't have a set opinion here,
Mhm.
but we've been doing this year-long approval of resolutions for a while. And I think in the beginning, having the presentations a month ahead, we're kind of like creating awareness. Hey, this is coming.
Yep.
But depending on which ones are expected to have activities, it might be nice for them not to be so far in advance, but for the presentations to allow for at least what's coming up. Doesn't have to be, because board meetings aren't necessarily going to fall in the right week.
Mhm.
But I do think it's a richer presentation and more beneficial for us, but even more so for the community to see what's happening. If it can share,
Mhm.
what we're doing, what the plans are. I mean, maybe the pictures are of last year potentially, but make it more real rather than next month we have. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Right.
Because we want it to feel like
Yeah.
we're honoring that thing, not just, hey, this
Right.
is coming up.
Right. And that has been part of the piece, I think, for our team. When it hasn't occurred, we're often referring to older information or older presentations or things principals have carried through the year to be able to kind of honor and recognize. And so I don't think it gives everybody kind of equal access in that sense for us to be able to honor everything that's going on across all the schools.
And I mean, depending on where the board meeting fell,
Right.
it might be it's next week and this is what's happening, or it might be it was last week and here are some pictures.
Mhm.
And kind of putting it out there that it's not a we forgot or anything like that. It just has to do with timing and how to make them interesting so
Right.
they're not all exactly the same.
Well, and we actually set that calendar in Ed Services, and we've always kind of set it that it happens the previous month, so we could take a look at the ones that we've kind of settled on, look at the months that they actually are being honored. And now we could kind of decide, okay, that's one that seems like it should be an in the moment kind of a presentation with schools input and community and honoring and bringing kids in. I always want to, in retrospect, after we do a resolution, I go to a school site and I see something happening and I go, oh, I wish I had been able to bring, this group of students or this principal to kind of talk about this. So to be able to do that and kind of hone in on the resolutions we just identified and how we want those to play out. And then we could bring kind of proposed schedule back to you at the next workshop to kind of wrestle around with and see if that works.
One possibility could be that maybe similar to what we're doing now in advance of an acknowledgement. And just, it's not a presentation, it's just a notification to the public through the board meeting that this is coming up. And that leaves the opportunity for a number of those that do have activities associated with them to do something even during or right afterwards that can demonstrate, what actually happened.
So it would be helpful to me to know which of the resolutions are having on-campus activities attached to them and which ones are more just acknowledgements.
Sure.
Be-
I will I will tell you all of these. So in a weekly update that I do to our principals and office managers, I do kind of front load what the resolutions are, some resources, things that we've kind of pulled together in ed services. So for the most part, all the SRVUSD resolutions that you see do occur and are honored and elaborated on in the classroom buildings each month. I think the hard part we struggle with is, again, not being able to take the evidence of all that hard work and being able to bring it forth here. So I was thinking about what Ken said around that acknowledgement piece, front loading almost, if you will, what's coming, and then circling back and being able to capture some of the things that we front loaded in a way that really honors and celebrates, because it's kind of two pieces for me: the acknowledgement, the awareness, the understanding of what the resolution is meant for, that historical piece or that informational piece that maybe the public and our kids and our teachers and our educators and or everyone that's on the ground with our students do or do not know. And then how are we actually celebrating with kids? And it's neat to see the different ways that people choose to do that,
That would be great.
if that's a process.
Yeah, I like Ken's idea of having the, letting us know and letting the community know what's coming up, and maybe it's, maybe it's just a simple line item with a description or something, and then allowing for the opportunity to then show us in the community how that that was initiated in the district.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And we initially had started it that way with just kind of the description, and then it felt like we really wanted more meat to celebrate. And I know Trustee Mintz has brought that up before, and so we agree. So I like that idea as well.
Great.
All right. All right. So that was kind of our two goals for today. We're more than able to, have some discussion about the next workshop, but ideally what we wanted to do was put together this list, bring back the compiled list, kind of bring back a snapshot of maybe some proposed dates, along with how we are going to present both, the front loading and then also honoring what's happening in our school sites publicly in the district presentations. The other thing that I would like to do, our resolutions are quite, I will say, we revise them every year, but they do probably need to be looked at again at this table. So I'd like to be able to pull the current resolutions, or if we don't have one, be able to seek out some input from other districts and obtaining some resolutions that they have if we don't have a current resolution file, and bring forth kind of a stack, if you will, for the next workshop that we can kind of go through and really dive into the content and see what we'd like to add, tweak, edit, and kind of go from there.
I had one thought related to the question we had related to the special education week, or that question of what might we do. We might want to circle it back to ability awareness, and then maybe you could look at focusing on particular areas
Yeah, I like that, Rachel.
and
ability
framing it as
awareness.
ability awareness. And we already have activities, prepared. That might be.
I like that.
And it's not
More
just special
inclusive.
education. It's
Right,
a little
right.
broader, and it
And
fits a little more with our diversity, inclusion, and equity
Absolutely.
piece.
I like that.
Well, because that also encompasses not only learning disabilities, but also physical, right?
Yes.
And
I did not want to be remiss to include, Ron wrote me back in September when we were initially going to be proposing this. And one of the resolutions, his feedback from himself and from the Senate was that the Asian American Heritage Month be named Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So just for you to consider that title, that did come up from the kids and from Ron. So I wanted to be able to make sure I brought that forth, and I failed to do so when we were in that month, so.
Would it from the with the intent of going through the actual resolutions and some having to be written and some being rewritten and those types of things, of would it make sense logistically from your side of things to partner with a board member in certain things? I mean, I know in my experience with helping on the Pride Month resolution, I think that was a good collaborative kind of opportunity, and it might be that, I think when we look at the list of resolutions, there are resolutions that really kind of hit home with us as individuals, and maybe that's an opportunity for us to kind of engage one-on-one with those.
I can do one of two things. I can bring the documents forth to a board meeting. We can review them and kind of do them as a group, or I could front load them. Most of them we currently have are our current resolutions. So if you looked at our current resolutions, what we've done is just edited, changed the dates, looked at the actual, there are some that we've spoke about today that I am going to have to completely go back to our Ed Services team and just kind of find samples of, so we can take a look at that at the next meeting and maybe divvy up the workload there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if that makes sense from your standpoint, that might be a way to collaborate and still have it be timely, as opposed to all of us kind of digging into every resolution at the board meeting, or you doing all the work and then us just saying yes or no. So.
And especially where we have, groups working on particular things, I think making use of our committees
Yeah.
to have their input, it'll feel more inclusive for them too.
And given that all of you sit on one of our steering committee, we could do that and do them that way, and you could bring them to your committees and give further input, or we can just kind of parcel them out that way for you to read and review based on.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then even like when I look at like an ability type of resolution, going to the CAC and talking to them about what they feel is important, so using not just steering committees, but also when it makes sense, using affinity groups or community groups.
I was using committees generally, not steering
Just steering,
committees.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
So Christine, are you viewing this as the work for next year's package, and we'll just go with what we have for the remainder of this year, or are you actually looking at affecting change for this year?
Well, I think that is up to you and to this group. We are fine either way. We do have proposed resolutions that are ready to go through the end of the year, but I do think our intent was to clean this up and to begin them now,
Okay.
so that we could start
kind of a little
to
above.
change the practice and to go from there.
I
Well-
think that's a good question, though, and I do want to remind you that we approved our resolutions only through December.
Right.
So we might need to go ahead and approve them during the year, and if we're able to update them before then we can. I just thought we need.
Because if we're looking at maybe the various staff appreciation ones for May, that might be a really reasonable piece to bite off to change for this year. And then
Right.
I think we'd kind of need to look at that whole list that you read from. That seems like a bigger
Right.
thing to do that kind of consolidating.
And I would say for just time purposes on our end, probably moving to approve some through maybe January, February, March, and then we begin to look at like March through June in our next meeting would really help us in Ed Services as well with everything that's been.
Yeah, no, I think rolling it out and it makes sense. Sorry.
So we can't take action today on anything,
Right.
but we could put approval
Yes.
of December through March
December.
on
Yes,
the
on the
next
agenda.
one.
Okay. So maybe if we December through March and then beginning in March, we'd start to look at, a phased roll-in. All right.
Okay. Great.
All
No.
right.
Today, were we going to, just for, I think, the purpose of the public, were we going to kind of, maybe not discuss, but like clarify maybe the process of like who can bring up a resolution, right? How can a resolution, brought forth and things like that. So actually, Christine, can you help us? Like, as far as I understand, anyone, either someone from the board or the public, right, can kind of reach out to
Absolutely.
us or the district or
Yes.
something and say, hey, I'm interested in
Yes.
having this as a resolution.
Yes.
Then after that, what happens? If they send the email or they talk to,
Well,
someone?
we traditionally, what we do when someone brings forth a resolution or asks a question about a resolution, we usually have conversation about exactly what's the topic they're looking for. We see if it's embedded or if it already exists. A lot of times families just haven't seen if it already exists, or people are inquiring to see if it already exists. If it doesn't, we bring forth that request to our Ed Services team and we have some discussion around what that resolution is, and ultimately we bring it forth to you. So if there was a community member who specifically wanted a resolution to be looked at at a deeper level, they would reach out to Debbie Pettish, our Director of Curriculum, who oversees the resolutions with our coordinators. And then we'd usually have like a one-on-one conversation with the person and go from there and bring it to Ed Services and then ultimately bring it to the board to have some conversation around.
Okay, great, thank you. Just want to kind of clarify that for everyone who might be interested.
Can I kind of go back to this idea of approving December through March? Is there a way to, in that, are we looking at approving what the previous list is for that? Because I see the CTE as, that's in February, and I mean, I would hate for that to get passed over. Maybe there's a way to look at the list and maybe there's one or maybe two that really are valuable and important that then we can kind of look to pushing through at the front end, and not in December, but February. I think, as opposed to just assuming that has to wait until 2023.
I agree about the CTE. I think we need to act on it this year. So however way that needs to happen, if we only have a couple that we can get done.
Well, maybe part of that is how the action item in December is worded. It's not that these are the resolutions for blah, 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 but we're approving these ones that are listed in December through March, and then additional ones could come forward and be added. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the other-
Cindy's
the
nodding
other
her
thing,
head.
though, I think is, getting back to a staff perspective on what we'd be expecting from a content and curriculum perspective. It's one thing to acknowledge CTE, but if we're expecting teachers to do something different, even for February, it's already kind of late, I think.
Yeah, no, I think, and like when I look at like the Pride Month resolution, and that was very, very quick turnaround, and I know that was hard, but it was, with a timeline of this year we will do this, next year we will do more, the next year, that type of thing. So, but just, I think so it is more acknowledgement with an intent
Yep.
to the future.
So it gets down to the wording of the resolution for this year versus what it can be.
Right. And I do think we really want to make every effort in Ed Services when a resolution's coming up, especially when, like, if we're going to add CT, we want to get out into the classes and see. And I think for me, knowing that that's one that's important to you when we're out on the ground in the next couple months, these are the things we're looking and talking and really taking pictures of and being able to say, oh my gosh, will you come in February and celebrate and honor some of the things we see in the schools?
We had some conversation, or I had some conversation, I think, with Dr. Malloy about a presentation on CTE sometime next year, because it's something that I think that we haven't, like I said, we haven't been able to, we've had our hands full with many other things, and we haven't been able to maybe focus on. So I don't know whether it's possible for those to coincide with February, because I see that that's coming up pretty fast, but it might be a good thing if we could make it happen.
I think going forward, our goal is that our CTE work will be incorporated into our deep learning work, but we are still evolving. In the meantime, though, if we are able to move forward with this particular resolution, we can build in some of that information at that time. But I'd like to see it as part of our cycle so that we're showing where we are, what we intend to do, what we've done, and what our next steps are going to be. As you know, that's a cycle that we're perfecting as quickly as we can and getting better at it as we practice.
Along with CT, maybe the Read Across America for March 2nd might be another one that we could get out there.
Great. Any other discussion? Questions? Okay. Great. And everything's clear from our perspective? Okay. Just wanna make Sure. Okay. Cool. So, public comment. Okay, because this is a special meeting of the board, public comment is only allowed on the items on the agenda. There will be no public comment for non-agenda items. And there is really just this one item on today's agenda, board governance. So yes, Helen of Doty Valley.
Hello, board. I quickly scanned through the list that you guys were looking at. I have these comments for you. Asian American Pacific Islander Month really should be broken into more specific region because Asia is a big continent. There are East Asians, South Asians, you have Islamic Asians in Australia, and New Zealanders are actually Asians as well. I really highly suggest that you can possibly break them into two different categories by the center of the equator. Talk about northern part of the Asian continent and then the southern part of the Asian continent. So then you don't have to lump them together. And I say this not to stress racism or whatever, but because for our children to become global citizens, quote unquote, so it is important for them to get to know the people that they will be working with in the future. So the emphasis should not be on history. It should be on their current civilizations, their current way of living, of lifestyle, and what we can, what is our relationship as Americans with these people in the future. So I would like you to please think about that. To keep dwelling in the past is really dumb because we are in education. We're educating the future, not the past. We should be aware of our future. We shouldn't go blindly we should be aware of our past. We shouldn't go blindly into our future. And there are some days and months that I have never been aware of, such as Math Statistics, Law Day on May 1st, Loyalty Day on May 1st. Those are really good qualities that we really should celebrate. There are so many days and months that are listed there. I highly suggest that you consider breaking down these days according to cognitive understanding and grasp of the children's age. When they're really young, it's really hard for them to understand days that are celebrating on more adult matters. I highly suggest that you would please consider celebrate certain days at the elementary school level, then forget about those days when they move on to middle school, then when they move on to high school. So then you can celebrate everything truly out of sincerity and not for political, motivations. And LGBTQ is dedicated in June. I don't understand why is Harvey Milk Day in May on May 22nd. It doesn't make any sense. Then it makes it 2 months. So I really highly suggest that, it's a good idea to move Harvey Milk to just June, forget about May 22nd, and then dedicate that month to something like Loyalty Day, Law Day. And also we need to have a whole month dedicated to Americanness, which is our Constitution. And because we're all
Thank you, Helen. That's
Americans,
3
it's
minutes.
important. Thank you. I understand. I'm out of time, but Constitution Month is important, not day. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to let you know, because I think you weren't here when we were talking about actually taking the theme of Constitution, citizenship, and where we'll be discussing more about that, as well as the theme of how do we celebrate, right, each cultural group and not, but at the same time being inclusive. So thank. Yeah. Anyway, I guess unless there's other comments or questions, we will adjourn our workshop.